Today on an all-new Dr. Phil. She claims the unthinkable happened when she was a child.
They would tie me up, expected me to pleasure them.
And now,
we have gone to the police multiple times.
They don't believe you.
She believes the abusers are back.
I often have to hide bruises and cuts.
Trash carved on flesh. Police say wound self-inflicted. I have to consider the possibility that this is a very tortured reality in your mind. Let's do it.
Show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by. We'll count you down.
Today's going to be a changing day in your life.
5, 4.
I am not giving up on you. A very frightened anonymous source wrote into us about our guest Rachel, claiming she is the victim of sex trafficking and mind control. Now, the source asked us to please help this young mother. So we reached out to Rachel, who told us she has to be locked inside her bedroom at night for protection and can never be left alone. She claims she has lived a life of constant fear and abuse since she was 9 years old and is still mysteriously triggered, controlled, and violated to this very day.
We moved to a new town when I was 9 years old. One of the first people that I met was a male in my community. He would make comments about how I looked and that I was beautiful, and he made me feel special. I remember that I went to his house. The next time that I talked to him, he pulled out a folder of pictures of kids, and they didn't have any clothes on. He mentioned that this is how God made these children and that they're beautiful, and he thinks I'm more beautiful than these kids. He let me kind of hide myself under a sheet and take my clothes off. Towards the end, I told him if he wanted me to, I would take my underwear off. And he acted extremely happy, and so I did. He always said to me was, I could never tell anybody about this stuff because if I did, he would lose his wife, he would lose his job, and I didn't want to hurt him. One of the next times that I went to his house, he wanted to teach me what making love was. He started to touch me and take my clothes off, and I remember it hurting really bad. When it was done, he told me that I now belong to him. There was a point that when I went there, he had another guy there, and this time he was telling me I was supposed to make love to this guy. I was not okay with this at all, and he dragged me over to where his kitchen was, and he pulled out a knife, and he told me, I will make love to this man. So I did what he said. We continued in this manner for about a year before things got even worse. I remember being taken to a small white house. He brought other men in, and it seemed like each one had a different fetish of some sort. They would tie me up to these poles to where I couldn't move. So a lot of the abuse that they did had a lot to do with scripture, and this was my purpose in life. One guy in particular, he would hurt me with crosses and would often even refer to himself as Jesus. They had people dress up as if they were God and would tell me that I needed to worship him in awful ways. I visited this White House off and on for at least the next couple of years. When I graduated from 8th grade and went on to high school, I really felt like this chapter of my life was over, but then I found out later that it wasn't.
Well, Rachel says that this nightmare was, in fact, far from over because she claims as an adult, her past came back to haunt her. Now, it's a shocking story, no doubt, and it needs to be handled very delicately because the question is this: is this woman currently in real danger? Or is she suffering from some type of mental trauma? Clearly, something has happened here. The question is, how extensive is it? What is real and what is not?
In 2014, I came across a Facebook post of a friend of mine whose daughter had done a painting. In the bottom of the post, she wrote, "Thank you," to the same man that had groomed and abused me. In that moment, my whole world fell apart. I remember immediately running to the bathroom and throwing up 6, 7 times that day, realizing I'm not the only one. I needed to make some sort of a report. This was manipulation and a mastermind hurting a child. Another couple weeks later, a truck pulled up behind me and he motioned for me to pull over, and I did. They had me get out of the car, and on the side of the road, they took turns raping me and kicking me and spitting on me and telling me that I'm ugly and disgusting and trash and that I'm not gonna talk ever again. And they left me there in the dirt on the side of the road and drove off. My husband told me we either need to press charges or we need to move. And so I was too scared to press charges, so we moved. Around June of 2015, he showed up at my house. He explained to me that there would be some men that would show up, and when I heard the revving of engines, then I was supposed to leave my house, and they would drive me to a hotel, and there would be people there. They expected me to pleasure them, and so that's exactly what happened. When the revving engines happened, I left the house. In my head, I was also to the point where I thought it was best for the safety of my family. This went on for at least another year. Probably 2 nights out of the week I would go, and I would often have to hide bruises and cuts and things from my husband. In 2018, there was an incident where a man showed up to my house and he broke through a window, and immediately a shadowy figure came towards me and beat the crap out of me and proceeded to take out a knife and carve the word trash into my stomach. These men have continued to harass me, harass my family with messages and with showing up and occasionally hurting me as well. We have gone to the police multiple times about the assaults, and they believe that I am mentally ill and have made this all in my head. I've continued in this nightmare since I was 9 years old, and it continues until this day.
Well, Rachel, I'm glad to meet you, but very sorry for the circumstance. I wish we were talking about 1,000 other things
Me as well.
than this. You say that this community member said he would lose everything if you told anyone, and you cared about him, so you kept the secret. And that's a typical tool of these adults that victimize children, is they get them into their confidence. This is our secret, and it's either I'll hurt you, your family, or you'll hurt me. And so they put a big guilt burden on the child at the time, and that's what was done with you, correct?
He was a master at it, you know. He did everything grooming-wise. And as I have gotten older, you feel guilt because you fell for the tricks, but I've had to remind myself, I was 9 years old and he was a master at what he did. I didn't have a chance.
Not to short shrift or trivialize the things that happened as a child, but this didn't stop during childhood. This went on, and that's something that has to be dealt with as well. Coming up, Rachel says her husband, he's done everything he can to help her. He's left his job. He's moved the family multiple times, bought a new car to try and keep her safe. We're going to meet him and talk about that next.
I had never heard of sex trafficking Rachel did a really good job of concealing things. She would leave after I would already be asleep. She would wear sweatpants and sweatshirts and long sleeves in the middle of the summer. That concealed all those bruises.
And later, your understanding is that these are tracking devices.
Yeah.
You removed one of the devices yourself. That had to hurt.
One of the things that people don't understand about trafficking is it's not just sex. I had one person say to me, "Do you just like sex?" It's not what this is. It's awful. It's sadistic. Like, you are tortured and hurt. And so there was absolutely no liking going to these places and doing these things. But I didn't feel like I had a choice.
Rachel's husband, Ben, says he 100% believes his wife is being mysteriously mind-controlled and violated by sadistic men. Not one individual that may have molested her as a child, but a whole group of mysterious men, because we're talking here about what Rachel says is sex trafficking. But sex trafficking happens every day in America, on the streets of America. Happens in your town, my town, and you'd be astounded how common it actually is. Now, he is frustrated that police don't buy her story and that her accusers are trying to make his wife look like she is insane.
Fairly recently, I realized that my wife was leaving in the middle of the night to meet these men. It was a what the hell moment. I had never heard of sex trafficking. It wasn't even like a conceivable thought before my wife. I didn't notice that she was spending as much time in the bedroom. She would leave after I would already be asleep. Rachel did a really good job of concealing things. She would wear sweatpants and sweatshirts and long sleeves in the middle of the summer. That concealed all those bruises. It's very disturbing for me to know that my wife feels dependent upon them. It's sick. I believe that these men are the darkest evil I've ever seen or probably will ever witness on this earth. I've had many instances where I wanted to show up and knock on their doorstep and take matters into my own hands. But I've got 4 children. I'm scared of what I'm gonna do. I started sleeping on the couch because I wanted to be the first line of defense if someone tried to come into our home. So I slept with a knife at some points. I haven't questioned whether it's real or not. I know who my wife is, and I've seen the text messages about what they were going to be doing, and I enjoyed your wife. A local authority told us many times that this is something that we've watched too many movies and things like this aren't happening, and basically telling us that we're non-credible people. I'm looking for ways in order to keep my family safe, but also looking for help for my wife and these triggers that she deals with, because these men have control over my wife, even now.
Well, Ben, good to meet you, and again, sorry for the circumstance.
Yep.
So I'm curious, have you ever been personally threatened? Have any of these men ever talked to you?
I've received text messages from.
But I mean, personally.
I have not personally.
Because text messaging can come from anywhere.
Correct.
We know that. But have you ever talked to any of these men and been threatened by any of them?
Personally, I have not.
Okay, and you say that you think that this started with a call that Rachel made to the Department of Child and Family Services to report this community member for grooming a young girl, and that triggered retaliation and that sort of thing.
Correct.
Now, you say that in June of 2015, you were contacted by your original abuser, came to your house after you having moved how many times?
At that point, 2.
Probably around
2, 3 times? Okay, it just showed up at your house? Just,
Yeah.
and there he stands.
Yeah, I mean, he used a sad sob story of, I want out of this ring. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. But he said he needed a certain amount of money. He needed my help. And I still struggled with that, okay, maybe he's made some mistakes. I have to do what he says. And there was just, I mean, it was a conflict of a 9-year-old. It was a conflict of, I know who's out there and I know what could happen to my family. And then there was just a feeling of, well, there's no choice.
He tells her, okay, you're going to hear some engines revving out in front of the house. And when you hear those, that's your cue to come out. So you could hear the engines rev.
I could hear it.
And you didn't hear it.
I didn't hear it. I'm pretty sound sleeper. If I go to sleep, I'm really asleep.
But at some point, you realize, because she told you what was going on. Because at that point, wouldn't you sleep in front of the front door? Wouldn't you sleep with a shotgun? Wouldn't you do something? I mean, have police on speed dial do something to keep it from happening?
So we went and we got a security system, and it was something to where we thought that just added another layer of security.
What about the cameras? Did you see her leaving on the cameras?
Just stop. Just hang on, Levi.
What do you think you're videotaping here? What do you see?
It was not uncommon for this type of thing to happen all of the time.
We went through the process of trying to protect my wife by setting up security cameras, and we started noticing whenever I would be at work and she would be at home, I would open up my cell phone and I would see a white truck in front of our house, and I would call Rachel and I would say, Rachel, what is that white truck doing out in front of our house? And she would look out and she says, there's no white truck in front of our house. Someone was changing the video and transposing another image in front of our house. And that was kind of a tipping point to where we kind of understood, you know, this isn't secure anymore. There's something going on with this.
And what about the cameras? Did you see her leaving on the cameras?
So our cameras were actually manipulated. So at that point, we knew something was off. And so instead of going from there, we hung up closed circuit cameras, something to where they weren't hackable. And even still, we found out later that these cameras were being they were fuzzed out from a light being shown in them, and then they all went blank. And we didn't have any.
So you've never seen an image of her leaving the house?
I have not.
Not one time?
That's
Or
correct.
coming back?
That's correct.
You've never awakened to find her gone?
I have not. I've been awake where she has been triggered and was walking down the hallway, and I yelled out at her. I said, Rachel. And, you know, obviously we were able to work through that, but never to where she was like halfway
And
out.
did you ever find her back in bed the next morning where it was obvious she had been gone? She had muddy feet. Okay. Rachel says one of her abductors took a laser and burned out the infrared lenses of their 8 home security cameras, so she had to take matters into her own hands. She recorded a truck, she says, was acting suspiciously.
What are you doing? Just stop. Just hang on, Levi.
What do you think you're videotaping here? What are you seeing?
So it was not uncommon for this type of thing to happen all of the time. I noticed his headlights outside, and so I looked, and then when it started driving slow in front of our house originally is when I went ahead to video. And I mean, I don't ever know. I'm sure a part of me's paranoid as well, but I don't ever know what's them and what's not.
Right.
And so I turned my camera on.
How many times do you think they've revved their engines and you've left the house and gone to a motel?
It's gone in spurts, for sure. During that 2015 time, I probably went twice a week. And then once he became aware of it, things, like we really started trying to put up stops. And it seemed like any time we would put up stops, they would come at us with a different thing. But I would say this summer, maybe 4 times. But so part of the problem would be I wouldn't remember it. I would disassociate, but I would have marks on my body. And so I would try and figure out, okay, what the heck happened?
So you're saying twice a week in spurts, so there'd be like 8 times a month, and then other times 4 times a month, and every time under your radar.
Correct. So
Never heard of coming back in.
no.
Coming up, Rachel says she's found mysterious devices all over her body from her alleged abusers. We're going to find out what a doctor said after he examined her next.
There was a point where I felt something hard under my skin on my leg, and we started to wonder, okay, maybe there's a tracking device of some sort. We had heard that that can be something traffickers do. We would receive messages often that they seemed to know where I was and what I was doing, and we really didn't have any idea how that was possible. There was a point where I felt something hard under my skin on my leg, and we started to wonder, okay, maybe there's a tracking device of some sort. We had heard that that can be something traffickers do. And so one night I went ahead and cut it out myself. The doctor verified it was something that was not supposed to be in a person, for sure. I have absolutely no memory of any of these being put in my body.
Well, Rachel's husband, Ben, says he's felt what could be a tracking device under his wife's skin, but never saw her physically remove it. Now, Rachel recently went to a doctor to get another device removed from her arm. Take a look.
On a recent afternoon, I had a medical colleague call me somewhat in a urgent manner to take care of a young girl who was involved in the sex trafficking industry. He felt like there was an implantable device in her forearm. On exam, there was a little scar on her left forearm, and then you could feel some fullness right underneath that scar as well.
Do we know for sure something was implanted for sure, or no?
No.
She allowed us to excise that scar.
That's it right there. It's encapsulated, which means your body just kind of walls it off with scar tissue.
It was definitely not normal.
There it is, right there. That is not tissue. That's definitely not normal.
We went ahead and removed it. We checked the rest of that wound, and it was a lot smaller than the other device she had removed.
Smaller than the other one.
So that feels firm, but I don't see like a metallic fragment.
Your understanding is that these are tracking devices.
Yeah.
You removed one of the devices yourself. That had to hurt.
Not when you're completely numb at that point. Not necessarily like I numbed myself, but just numb.
Yeah. Now, this is a picture of what you removed from your leg. And this is a metallic device. And how long is that? It's hard to tell from the picture. Is it
It's like a grain of rice almost, maybe
Yeah.
a little bit smaller than that. Yeah.
kind of small? And then we saw what the doctor took out. We spoke to a PI, and that's a pretty high-tech guy. And he says it's just not possible to track humans with some kind of GPS device that's implanted. There are all kinds of GPS tracking devices. The one on the left is an ankle bracelet, like you see with people that are put on, probation or whatever, and electronically. The one in the middle is for pets, and the one on the right is for elderly people or children or whatever. You can put some kind of bracelet or necklace on them where it'll ping, and you can find them if they tend to wander off. But you can see none of those could be implanted in any way that wouldn't be pretty obvious. When was the last time you believed that you were triggered and left the house to meet up with these men you were expected to service?
This last summer, maybe July or August, I don't.
Okay, so it hasn't been that long. No. And you've been to the police about this. What do they say?
Originally, or when I first talked to police officers, they almost always are like, we're going to stop this. We're going to help you. And then within a day or two, either they don't call us back anymore, or they'll tell me, I'm sorry, we can't help you.
They don't believe you.
They don't believe me, no.
They don't believe you. These are some of the police reports that have been filed. Front porch break-in, hand injured, security footage didn't show anything. 12/20/17, a community member says falsely accused by Rachel, RE controlling a sex ring. February 9th, 18, break-in, attack, hand cut, trash carved on flesh. Neighbors hear no struggle. Police say wound self-inflicted. So there's nothing in there where they say this family is under attack, this woman is being victimized. Rachel's church friend sent us some upsetting images she received of a woman she thought was Rachel. So we're going to tell you what our team found out, and we'll talk about that next. There are two photos that were sent to the anonymous source of a blonde woman. The friend thought it was Rachel, and Rachel thought one could be her as well. One was a BDM-type photo, and the other looked like it was a sexual assault. We did search out those images, and there are ways to find those images, and we did.
This situation has affected our level of intimacy totally. My wife is a beautiful woman, and being able to want to share that with her, you can't. Initially, I felt like I was re-traumatizing my wife anytime that we would be intimate together. At this point, I've left that decision up to her, and I'm ready whenever she is.
Rachel, you feel like the control, the power that has been wielded over you for so much time acts as you call a trigger, which puts you into an altered state of consciousness, and you do things without awareness, without conscious control, without conscious choice. And that's kind of a vague fugue state for you. It's not something that's crystal clear. You're not aware of what's going on, and then you're back.
Pretty much, yes. I mean, I don't know that I turn into a different person, but I definitely obey and do exactly as I'm told, just like I did when I was 9.
So you're in what we call a fugue state. It's fuzzy, it's disconnected from your life.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
I mean, yeah.
You're not going over your daily schedule while you're there?
No, there's no thoughts like that. And it's things, obviously, that I would never do.
Of course. Okay. And there are two photos that were sent to the anonymous source of a blonde woman. The friend thought it was Rachel, and Rachel thought one could be her as well. One was a BDM-type photo, and the other looked like it was a sexual assault. We did search out those images. There are ways, if those images exist anywhere besides just in that person's possession, if they're anywhere digital, they have an electronic signature, and there are ways to find those images, and we did.
Okay.
And neither of the images was you.
Okay. Like the things that I know is factual. Like, I'm not the only one that saw the man come to the door with the whip. It was on camera. Things like that, it leads me, honestly, to believe that it's not just in my head.
This is one consideration that you have to make. Anytime someone is entering a dissociative state, and people do this when they're under great stress or anxiety or being tortured or raped or whatever, they simply leave their consciousness and they go to a whole other world, a whole other awareness as a way to cope. And the fact that you are in that state, you really don't know what happened.
Right.
But there is the possibility that this is a very tortured reality in your mind, but not in the real world. It is a possibility that no one is revving their engine. You're not leaving the front door. You're not getting in this car. You're not going to a motel or another location, being violated and coming back home and getting in bed, but in a tortured, nightmarish existence brought on by things that clearly, in my view, happened to you in an earlier time in your life, is a reality that you're experiencing the same as if it did happen.
And I understand that wholeheartedly, but I also, the things that other people have seen and it...
For example, I took away all ways of communicating, the cell phone and things like that, all computer, internet, everything like that. And there were still messages coming through.
Listen, I'm not saying this didn't happen.
Correct.
I'm saying you have to consider that the absence of objective corroborating information on your behalf in all of this time, you have to consider that this could be happening in a very tortured reality for her that doesn't make it any easier for her. Because let me tell you, for her, it's the same as if it is actually happening. And I'm not saying it's not. And I'm not saying it, for your experience, it doesn't really matter. Because for you, it's the same whether it's happening or whether you are experiencing it mentally from the scars that are left from before. And that sounds so strange to you because it's so real to you. I'm not believing you. From a psychological standpoint, I have to consider the possibility that this is all happening in a very tortured reality in your mind. And if that's true, it's honestly as torturous and real as if it's happening in actuality.
Like the things that I know as factual, I don't know, like I mean, I'm not the only one that saw the man come to the door with the whip. It was on camera. Things like that, it leads me, honestly, to believe that it's not just in my head.
And you know what? It could be some of both, because you could be getting harassed by the people that did victimize you that you've tried to hold to account.
Yeah.
And they could be harassing you. But somebody putting something up on the internet is different than you leaving your house at night and going and meeting a bunch of men to be raped at night. I'm just saying, if you really want to unlock this mystery, you have to be fully open to considering the possibility that you could hold the key to stopping that part of this experience for you. And you have to be open to that possibility as well. I want you to know, I hear you. I get you. Something's happened to you along the way. And what you're talking about as a child, there's a whole different ring to it than the other part of this. Because whatever this story turns out to be, you deserve help with healing those wounds, because you weren't believed as a child. But I believe you now, and I want to help you heal those wounds.
Thank you.
And I think that's a place to start, and then be open-minded about the other. And that doesn't mean there's not real-world harassment in here as well. We'll be right back. Rachel, how do you feel about what I'm saying?
Confused. I don't think I'm crazy, and I know you're not saying that.
No, I'm not.
But I mean, I see it in my head, and I remember things.
What am I saying?
That there's a chance that because of the trauma that I've had as a kid,
that this associative state could be putting things in my head that maybe aren't really there.
I also don't rule out that you are being victimized by predators. I don't rule that out. I don't want you to rule my possibility out. I'll rule yours in, you rule mine in.
Okay.
And I want you to have some healing for what happened to you earlier. Those are open wounds that can change you. And because we're in a pandemic, I'm going to set up 10 sessions immediately for you with Doctor On Demand, which is our own company, so we'll get that set up for you. You can stay in the comfort of your own home on computer and talk to a board-certified, licensed, PhD-level therapist that specializes in survivors of exactly what you've been through to help you understand how to unravel that and give yourself some help and some hope. And I'll set that up for you immediately.
Thank you.
And what do you hear me saying, Ben?
I understand the therapy and her getting into someone that can help her work through that. We can start uncarving and we can start getting closer to that real answer of what's going on currently. I fear for our safety in the meantime.
Well, I do as well, but I can tell you this. I have a really big platform here and a really big spotlight. And if this is happening and I was one of those guys and I knew all of a sudden that the Dr. Phil platform had a big bright light over this, I would scatter like roaches if I was those because we're watching.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of my guests today. If you at home want to have your own Doctor On Demand, just go to Google Play Store or the Apple App Store and download the Doctor On Demand app. If you want more information about today's episode, you can log on to drphil.com. More information about sex trafficking, which is a whole lot more common than what you think. If you want to know more about children being at risk, understand that less than 5% of child molestation comes from strangers. 95, 96% of it happens from people you know. We'll be talking about this on Facebook later. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.
I think everything you said was perfect and very accurate. And thank God she's here, and thank God her husband is here, because I think they needed to hear it. I think when they leave here and they settle down, they're going to see everything you said is just what they needed to hear.
Well, I just hope she'll be open-minded about it.
I think she will. I think she will. I think when they walk out of here and they're alone together, they're going to hear everything and they're going to know you're right.
Well, I just hope they're not so defensive about it.
We're set anytime.
So sad.
All right, let's think about that.
Well, hey, guys. I wanted to come out and chat with you guys about this a little bit, because I know it's a heavy topic. I know it's a hard topic. My number one concern going in is I think it's terrible if you ever don't believe a victim. But there is a point where the story becomes so fantastical and so conspiratorial and many-sided that there are opportunities to confirm, and if nothing comes up to confirm it, that you've got to start saying, what are the alternative explanations? It's the scientific principle of Occam's razor or the principle of parsimony. The simplest explanation of a phenomenon is more often the best. And I realize that perception is reality. If people believe something, it's reality to them. Do you think it's on purpose, or do you think it's a tortured reality?
Trauma response. Tortured reality.
Like blacking out.
Trauma.
Yeah, I do think it's trauma-induced. Guys, thank you so much. Got to run.
Bounce, bounce, all the girlies bounce. Take them to my house, turn the party out. Bounce, 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 all the girlies bounce. Take them to my house, turn the party out.
You warned me 1,000 times, memories can kill ya, but I didn't hear ya. I thought that I could fly, but woke up on the asphalt. I swear there was the last time. I've always been naive, call it